There are stories that make you stop mid-scroll and question everything you thought you understood about a person. Joyce Meyer is one of those stories. For millions of people around the world, she is the woman who taught them how to fight their inner battles, how to trust God through pain, and how to find joy when life feels impossible. Her voice has filled living rooms, hospital waiting areas, and prison cells. Her books have sat on nightstands next to Bibles. Her face has appeared on television screens in over 100 countries. She is, by almost any measure, one of the most influential Christian communicators of the modern era. But the full story of Joyce Meyer is not the polished version that appears on stage. It is messier, darker, and far more complicated than the highlight reel suggests. And in recent years, piece by piece, the layers have been peeling back in ways that have left even her most devoted followers struggling to process what they are hearing. This is not a story about a villain. It is something more unsettling than that. It is the story of a deeply wounded person who rose to extraordinary heights in the trail of controversy, contradiction, and genuine tragedy that followed her all the way there. To understand where Joyce Meyer ended up, you have to understand where she started. Born Pauline Joyce Hutcherson on June 4, 1943, in St. Louis, Missouri, she came into a world that offered her very little softness. Her father had served in World War II, and whatever version of him went overseas, a different version came home. The man who returned to that household brought with him something broken and dangerous. Alcohol played a role. Control played a bigger one. And fear became the invisible architecture of everything inside that house. Joyce has spoken publicly about what her father did to her, and the details are not easy to sit with. From early childhood until she left home at 18 years old, she was sexually abused by her father. She has said it happened more than 200 times. 200 times over the course of more than a decade. That number alone should stop a person cold. This was not a single incident buried in the past. This was the sustained, repeated destruction of a child's sense of safety, worth, and reality. He convinced her she could never tell anyone. He warped her understanding of what was normal. He made sure she understood that silence was the only option she had. What made it worse, and Joyce has said this herself, was her mother's response. Her mother knew something was wrong. She could see it, and she did nothing. She did not intervene, did not protect her daughter, did not create an exit. Whether it was fear, denial, or something darker, the result was the same. Joyce learned a lesson that would take decades to unlearn, that the people who are supposed to keep you safe will sometimes choose their own comfort over your survival. She stopped expecting rescue. She started surviving alone. When she turned 18, she did not walk out of that house toward freedom. She ran, and like many people running from one pain, she ran directly into another. She married a man she barely knew, a part-time car salesman, hoping that a new last name and a new address would be enough to start over. It was not. Her first husband was, by most accounts, a disaster from nearly the beginning. He disappeared for days at a time. He manipulated her emotionally. He left her without money and without transportation. On one occasion, he abandoned her entirely while they were traveling, leaving her stranded in Albuquerque with nowhere to turn and no way home. When she became pregnant with her son David, he moved out and moved in with another woman. The message could not have been clearer. She was on her own. She later called those 5 years a nightmare, and the word fits. But it gets worse. During this period, under the influence and emotional pressure of her husband, Joyce participated in stealing payroll checks from her employer. He cashed them to fund their lifestyle. She knew it was wrong. She did it anyway. Fear and dependency had already conditioned her to follow rather than resist. It would take years before she returned and repaid every dollar she had taken, a fact she has acknowledged publicly as part of her story of redemption. Her husband, however, kept going down that road until it ran out entirely. He was eventually arrested for writing fraudulent checks and sent to prison. That arrest ended the marriage. But the damage it left behind took far longer to address. After the divorce, Joyce did not immediately find herself. She smoked heavily. She spent nights in bars. She moved from one short-lived relationship to another. Looking at it from the outside, it might have looked like someone falling apart. From the inside, it was something more desperate than that. It was someone trying, in every wrong way available to her, to feel something other than pain. Then Dave Meyer entered the picture, and for once something in Joyce's life actually held. She met Dave in 1966, and from the beginning, he represented something she had never consistently experienced: steadiness. He did not erupt. He did not disappear. He did not demand that she perform or pretend. They married, built a family together, and raised 4 children. On the surface, it sounded like the turnaround her life had been waiting for. But the wound she carried did not simply dissolve because the circumstances improved. Joyce has been remarkably honest about the person she was in those early years of marriage. She has described herself as controlling, verbally harsh, and chronically angry. She gave Dave the silent treatment for weeks at a time. She created emotional storms that he was left to navigate alone. At one point, Dave told her plainly that he had tried everything to make her happy, that it was obvious she was determined to be miserable, and that he was going to enjoy his own life regardless. It hurt her to hear it, but it was also the kind of honest statement that broke through in a way that softer words never could have. Dave eventually told her he was not sure how much longer he could hold on. That was the moment something shifted. Joyce recognized that she was about to lose the one person who had actually stayed. It was not an overnight transformation. It was a slow and painful turning toward healing, toward faith, and toward confronting what had been done to her and what she had, in turn, done to others. In February 1976, something happened to Joyce Meyer that she describes as the moment everything changed. She was driving home from a routine appointment when she felt overwhelmed, empty, and out of answers. She cried out, and she says what followed was an experience of God speaking directly to her heart. She described it as feeling like liquid love had been poured over her. Whatever label a person puts on that kind of experience, the effect on her life was real and measurable. She began leading small Bible studies with coworkers, informal gatherings in restaurants and borrowed spaces. People showed up. Then more people showed up. By 1980, she had joined Life Christian Center in Fenton, Missouri, a church with about 30 members. She started a women's Bible study in her home. Within weeks, more than 100 women were attending. That number eventually climbed to 500. The pastor recognized what he was watching and gave her the title of associate pastor. She began recording her messages for a local radio station, doing it inside her son's bedroom closet, which functioned as a makeshift recording booth. It is one of those details that is almost too fitting. A woman who had been silenced her entire childhood, recording messages of hope from inside a closet. By 1985, she had launched her own radio program, Life in the Word. It started as a 15-minute weekly slot on a single St. Louis station. Within 5 years, it had expanded across the Midwest. In 1993, at Dave's encouragement, she moved into television, airing first on WGN in Chicago. The program that would eventually become Enjoying Everyday Life reached more than 100 countries and was translated into over 100 languages. She wrote more than 130 books. Her 1995 title, Battlefield of the Mind, became her defining work, selling millions of copies worldwide and still sitting on bestseller lists decades after its release. Several of her books reached #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. Her 2002 publishing deal with Hachette's Faith Words division was reportedly worth $10 million. By any standard, this was a remarkable rise. From a childhood defined by silence and survival to one of the most recognized voices in global Christianity. The arc of it is genuinely extraordinary. And then the question started. As Joyce Meyer Ministries grew into a global operation, the financial picture surrounding it began attracting attention that the ministry was not prepared to welcome. Reports began surfacing about the scope of spending connected to the organization. A $10 million Gulfstream, 4 private jet, multiple high-value homes purchased through the ministry, including Joyce's personal residence and additional properties for her children, all located within the same gated St. Louis County community. At the ministry's 158,000 square foot headquarters, Financial disclosures revealed spending that left many observers speechless. A $30,000 malachite table, a $23,000 antique commode, thousands more spent on artwork and high-end decorative pieces. In 2003, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch published a detailed investigation into the ministry's finances. The picture it painted was of an organization where the line between ministry resources and personal enrichment had become genuinely difficult to locate. Her reported salary at the time was $900,000 per year. Dave Meyer was drawing $450,000. When critics raised these figures, Joyce's response was, at least initially, unapologetic. She said she believed God had blessed her and saw no reason to apologize for the resources she had accumulated. That response did not land well with everyone. In 2007, the U.S. Senate Finance Committee, under Senator Chuck Grassley, opened a formal inquiry into 6 major televangelists, Joyce Meyer among them. Lawmakers were asking pointed questions about whether these ministries were using their tax-exempt status appropriately, or whether they had quietly transformed into personal wealth generation machines operating behind a religious shield. It was one of the more serious institutional challenges ever leveled at major televangelism, and Meyer was squarely in its crosshairs. Facing the pressure, she announced she would reduce her salary and instead draw income through her personal book royalties rather than routing money through the ministry. Critics noted that the practical financial effect of this adjustment was minimal, given the scale of her publishing earnings. The ministry did eventually join the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability in 2009 and added independent board members to improve oversight. The IRS ultimately did not revoke the ministry's tax-exempt status, but the scrutiny had done its work. The image of Joyce Meyer as a simple messenger of hope had become considerably more complicated. Watchdog groups also pointed to another structural concern: the fact that multiple members of Joyce's family held key leadership positions within the organization. Her husband and children were embedded in the operation at senior levels. Critics argued this kind of arrangement, regardless of the individual's competence or character, creates an inherent risk of blurred accountability. When the people responsible for oversight are also the people who benefit most directly from the organization's revenue, the checks and balances that a healthy institution requires tend to weaken over time. Then there is the theology, which has drawn a different and equally serious category of criticism. Joyce Meyer spent years associated with what is broadly called the prosperity gospel, the teaching that faith, when properly exercised,